Started and you're good to go.
All right, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining today. We've got a quick time frame here to get through this, so I'll go kind of quickly here. If you have questions, please do feel free to throw them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end. If not, I'm always going to be available through email, and I'll make sure I'll include my email at the end. And I'm also going to include a few follow-up resources for you to explore some of these topics a little bit more. But what we want to dive into today is this idea of leveraging generative AI to help us create free and OER resources. So we have these amazing tools that are out there, tools like ChatGPT, which will be the primary example that I'll use today. But there certainly are plenty of other generative AI tools to use. How can we leverage these tools to help us as instructors or instructional designers to create free and open educational resources for our students in our courses and help sort of avoid some of the issues that might come into play in terms of equity and inclusion when we have to have our students pay for some of these resources. Just a quick little introduction of myself. My name is Dan Barrancotta. I'm a professor at Western Governors University in the Educational Technology and Instructional Design program. I'm also an adjunct instructor at SUNY GCC, where I previously had served as an instructional designer as well. And I also work with SUNY CPD to deliver the instructional design certificate program, something that we just launched this fall, and highly encourage you to take a look at if you're interested in learning more about this topic, but really all things related to instructional design. So as we get in here and we get talking, I think it's important to recognize what generative AI is and what we can do with a tool like ChatGPT when we're looking at it from the designer standpoint, from the instructor standpoint. How can we leverage this? So the way I always like to think of generative AI in tools like ChatGPT is I like to go back to, like the 90s when we had chat rooms and AOL and Instant Messenger, and you sort of had these conversations and you were connecting with people on the other side of the screen through text. We didn't have Zoom yet. But we were sort of having these conversations, and sometimes we were able to learn some things. We were able to ask questions. We were able to interact with and engage with other folks in real time on the other side of that computer screen. And I like to think of that as sort of what we're doing with generative AI, but the person, so to speak, the on the other side of that screen is no longer a human person. It's this generative AI tool. It's a tool like ChatGPT. It's these large language models. And that person is the fastest learner in the world. And we get to have a conversation with the fastest learner in the world. And the reason I like to think of it this way is I think it's really important that we talk, and we'll talk more about this as we go, that we're conversational when we're leveraging tools like ChatGPT and generative AI. That we recognize and understand that we get to have a conversation here, and we get to have that conversation in real time, and we can ask questions and we can adjust and update our prompts based on the responses that we get, just like we would in a face-to-face interaction with a friend. In ChatGPT, generative AI, I like to refer to them sort of as the fastest learner in the world because the way that works, what these large language models are doing is scouring what's available on the internet, scouring what's available based on your prompts and what you've put in and other users have put into the generative AI tools, and it's using predictive models to sort of predict what word should come next in a sequence, and is learning as it goes. It's not it's not an independent thinker. It's not generating these, original ideas, but it's rather sort of synthesizing all the information that's available and putting it together in a way that sort of makes sense in that predictive nature, one word by one word. So that's where I always like to think of this as the fastest learner in the world, because if we ask it a question, it doesn't necessarily know the answer, it doesn't necessarily come up with the answer itself, but it very quickly learns the answer and gives us the answer. And that's the idea, I think, that I hope you can take away with you today, is this idea of being conversational and learning alongside this fastest learner in the world and with them. And the potential to use the AI tools like ChatGPT for OER creation, I think is really powerful. And it doesn't need to be that you're going to create, this full OER course that you're going to plan on sharing out nationwide. It might just be that you want to sort of update one of your courses, or even just update a particular module in the course. Maybe you have a textbook or a third-party product that you really like and that you use, but there's a particular topic, chapter, that your students are struggling with, and you don't really like the way the material is being presented. this is a way that you could sort of leverage AI. So rather than students needing to buy two textbooks or engage with two different resources, you can sort of supplement what you already have. Or maybe you can take, your students right now are using some type of expensive textbook, and that's creating some issues from some folks. And maybe you're trying to move away from that and find an alternative resource, but you're not finding an OER or a free resource that has everything that you need. How can we sort of supplement what's out there, supplement what you have, and create exactly what you need? And with the idea of ChatGPT for these resources, we can create these sort of very personalized resources. And when I say personalized, it's personalized for you as the instructor, the instructional designer, and what your students need. So it can fit exactly your learning goals and objectives and outcomes. And when we do this, and when we do this in a free way, we can make it in an accessible way. We can put it right into our learning management system, places like Brightspace. We're enhancing inclusion, we're enhancing equity, and we're providing, an educational experience for our learners that they're going to enjoy as well. And the way that we need to go about doing this, as I mentioned, is this idea of being conversational here. So when we're having this conversation with these AI tools, again, some of this AI stuff is a little bit creepy, sort of like this idea of this image, and that's why it's here, right? Because where does this end? What's real? What's not real? Sometimes, it's the just this week, what Tesla has come out with and what's available. Where the future goes, I'm not really sure. That's not for me to decide yet. But I think you can benefit. I know I certainly benefit by sort of mimicking a conversation that I would have with a person when I'm using ChatGPT. And it's funny because, I'll be in this conversation and I'll be saying things like "thank you" and "that's great." Just like I would if I was having that conversation with another human on the other side. And I think that in doing so, that's really helped some of the outputs that I've sort of got and helped me find exactly what I need. And when we use tools like this, they're only as effective as the prompts that we give them. So, these tools are not yet thinking for us. It doesn't know what you need. You have to provide as much information as you can to help the tool like ChatGPT give you what you want. And what you want should be exactly that. Don't settle necessarily for that first output that comes out or what's available to you on a Google search. Go find what you want, go create what you want, and be specific about that. So this idea of prompt engineering, I think, is really, maybe arguably the most important thing when we start talking about how to use these large language models for us, but also eventually for our students and how they'll be used in the workforce. So it's a really good and important technique to learn and become more comfortable with. And it all starts with crafting specific and very clear prompts. So the more information, the more clear we can be about exactly what we're looking for, the better results we're going to get. And that can be everything from including, the reading level that you want the output to come out. And so if it's an introductory course, you might want it at a lower reading level. If it's a graduate course, you might want to include that. So it's a higher reading level. You can be very specific about word counts. You can be specific about formatting. Do you want this in paragraph formatting, bullet formatting? Do you want it to be PowerPoint text slides? Again, being very clear about what you want. The idea of iterating for improved content is really important. And that gets back to this being conversational. When we say iterating, we're talking about, continuing to develop, continuing to tweak and make changes and to sort of learn from what we get and craft and continue to adjust to make it better. We're going into this experience, hopefully, with the idea that I'm not going to get exactly what I'm looking for on the first time, and that's okay. But based on what I get the first time, I'll know better what to ask for the second time. So again, that's where we're being conversational. I think a lot of times you might find if you're asking ChatGPT for something, for instance, you're going to get a very long-winded response, and that might not be exactly what you're looking for. So if you get that long-winded response, it's okay to say, hey, that's great. This is what I'm looking for, but shorten that down to 100 words or put it into 3 to 5 sentences, things like that. So you can get this to be exactly what you're looking for. And that's going to help you find ways to, again, leverage this and find what you're looking for and what you need rather than just what happens to be available out there. You can create exactly what you're looking for. And we'll take a look at some examples in just a moment. And we want to use this to, another thing that we can do is sort of enhance the existing coursework that we have. So, likely we're teaching a course, we have text and resources that we use for those courses. We have assignments and assessments that we use in those courses. But how can we maybe improve these course materials? How can we use AI to sort of supplement what we have? And this is, I think, maybe a really good starting off point for folks that are a little bit nervous or apprehensive about using these tools. You don't need to necessarily use ChatGPT and recreate a full course. Perhaps you just start with a particular area, where you're clearly seeing gaps in student learning, where they're not performing as well on a particular assessment as you would like them to. Is there a way that we can use AI to improve the course materials and the learning resources that students have available to them to start to bridge those gaps and to start to build some connections to improve their overall performance? So this can be anything from getting into AI and just making a single content page that might go into Brightspace or to your learning management system. It could be to help you create a PowerPoint. Could be to help you create an article or a course announcement. It could be, anything that you need it to be. Even developing sort of a script for a video that you might create. These are all things that you can use within AI, and you can describe the specific problem that learners are having in your course and at that particular moment, and talk about what you'd like to see those outcomes be, and ask AI to help you bridge those gaps and to help students build those connections. And we should always be, working to enhance our courses through that iterative design process where we're identifying those friction points and we're finding ways to continually improve. So when we see where the issues are, we know where we're trying to get to. Let's use a tool like AI to help us with that. And this is something that I've been doing a lot in a lot of my courses here. There's a lot of really good resources available online. There's a lot of really good text-based resources that we can use, but we know that our modern learners sometimes want more, or they want choice. They want sort of multiple ways to interact with the material. And, those are really important principles of universal design for learning. And we can use those principles and leverage those principles, but do it in an efficient way with AI. So you're not expected to go out there and recreate the wheel here. You're using AI sort of as your personal assistant to help you supplement what you have, to provide students with an alternative version, of this content to help them with a particular topic that they might be struggling with. I teach a computer programming course, and something that I used in my courses this year for the first time is I took an example coding project and inputted what these sort of instructions were. I inputted the code that I used to fulfill that prompt, and I put all this information into ChatGPT, and I just asked ChatGPT to create sort of a rundown explaining exactly what happened, a step-by-step process. So what it did was it took what I had, it took the problem and the answer to the problem, and it created this step-by-step explanation of exactly what was going on in the code and why that code was selected, and it put it in a written format that I could then share with students. So, here's an example of a problem we might have. Here's an example of code that solves that problem, and here's an explanation of why this is the code that we want to use. It was, that's something that saved me a lot of time. It happened sort of in the snap of a finger, and it created a very readable and usable document that was very accurate, and I was able to use that and put that in my courses. And students have been giving me a lot of really good feedback about that because they can kind of follow along that example and they can see sort of what this should look like and can look like and learn from that as they go. And with that being said, and with using things like that, we always want to be aware of, legal and ethical considerations that are out there. So, a lot of this is new still, and as we know, sometimes these processes can take a long time to sort of work their way through the courts. And I think there's going to be a lot of change in what this looks like in the future. So, I'm not here to say that I'm an expert in any of this, but as you're using AI and you're thinking about how to use this, in terms of putting content into your course. I'm just here to tell you that it's okay to do it. It's okay that you can use AI as a tool to help you create content for your courses. When you put in a prompt to ChatGPT and or any of these AI generative AI tools,
Hey Derek, it's Lynn again. I
the
managed to solve my problem, so cancel my
the
last
output
request.
the output there that comes out from ChatGPT, you are the owner. You have the ownership there. So it doesn't. There's no copyright protection that's there from ChatGPT. You essentially hold that ownership there, and you are the person that can use that because it's based on your unique and individualized prompts. It's your creation. So to take something from ChatGPT and to put it in your course, that's okay. Definitely when we ask our students to use resources or to complete assignments, we want to be aware of plagiarism issues and academic integrity issues where they're submitting work that maybe isn't their own and passing it off as their own. But when we're using this for content generation and we're using this to help us create assessments or maybe create rubrics for assignments, things like that, you don't necessarily need to have a citation every time you use something from ChatGPT. And a lot of times, I think what you'll find when you go through this process, something that I'm finding a lot is I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using the prompt engineering to really get this to sort of a workable point, and then I'm taking that and I'm going through it with a fine tooth comb. I'm changing it, I'm adjusting some of the verbiage and language that's there. I'm including some thoughts and ideas that are my own. So it really sort of morphs into this collaborative process with ChatGPT and with their output and what you're looking for. So it's not so much an academic integrity or plagiarism issue like it might be for a student passing off work on their own as you're using this to create it. So certainly feel free to use citations. Something that I often will mention right up front to my students is in the nature of transparency, but also in that I'm trying to teach them and about how to use these tools because I think this is going to be something that's really important, really for any future field that they're going into in terms of workforce development. Preparing them for their future jobs is how to use these tools appropriately. So, I'll mention that, it may be at the bottom of a page or at the beginning of a module that some of this content was generated with ChatGPT or with the assistance of ChatGPT, things like that. And I think that, again, provides sort of transparency in what you're doing, but I think students will appreciate that we're not sort of hiding from using this tool. It's a really great tool that's out there, and we can kind of be an example of how to use it in a positive light. So again, I'm not here to tell you exactly what is legal or what your university might say or what you should think in terms of ethics here. That's all up to each and every one of us to, I think, sort of work through. But I think the important idea I
Oops,
think the
sorry, Dan.
Nope, you're okay. I think the important thing here is that you're able to use these prompts, you're able to use these outputs, you're able to use this material to help support your courses. You don't need to necessarily attribute that or register that or pay for that. This is something that you can use, and I encourage you to do so. So I want to take just a little bit quick look at what this looks like. And again, I know we're only have so much time, so I'm going quick here. We should have a few minutes for questions still at the end. But I just want to pull up an example of something that another course that I teach is a career and educational planning course. So this is just an example here of a conversation that you might have based on what you're using and what you're trying to accomplish in some of these techniques and ideas that I mentioned throughout the presentation. So, what I did here is this is that idea again of prompt engineering. This is my initial prompt where I'm being very specific. I'm explaining what I am, what the course is, and where I teach it. So, it can be, ChatGPT can look up and learn information about your particular school or university and help tailor the materials right for that. I attach the course syllabus. This is something that I definitely encourage you to do when you're beginning these conversations. A lot of really valuable information about your course is in your syllabus, including the learning goals and objectives. And giving ChatGPT that information will help them tailor the resources and the materials and the ideas that they, give back to you. I'm going to explain exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm trying to, continue to iterate and update and make the changes for my course. And what I want to do is provide students with free resources in this course, so they don't need to purchase any textbooks. I'm trying to update the course module that teaches students about resumes. So in this particular course, they're going to learn how to create a resume. I want to update that particular module here at this time. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to help me create some content, learn the basics and best practices for creating professional resumes. That's what I want to do. What do I want that to look like? Well, in my head, I'm envisioning putting together some content pages in Brightspace. And I know that I have some really good resources that I like to use: YouTube videos, web pages, resources from, the college and the university itself. So what I want here is just to sort of supplement that with some text and with some information in Brightspace. So I want 250 words to sort of introduce the topic to students. And then I want ChatGPT to come up with 5 to 10 best practices for professional resumes, and for each to articulate their importance and how they can be leveraged, and then to provide an additional sort of online resource that I can share with students. And what I'm thinking in my head here is a content page with a couple of paragraphs at the beginning, and then using an accordion for each of those best practices. And that accordion provides the information here that I'm asking for. So that's what I'm asking here in my initial response. And this is what I get. I'm going to get the text at the beginning. I'm going to get some best practices. This I can use and I can sort of copy and paste or leverage and to help me create those accordions that I was mentioning. And I'm kind of going through this. I can read through this and see what it is. But as I'm looking at this isn't quite enough. One sentence here is not exactly what I'm looking for. I need something a little bit more. And that's okay. So I let ChatGPT know this is sort of good, but can we provide some more detail on the specific bullet points of the importance and how to leverage? So I'm being very specific about what I want, and that's what it does. And now it just gives me back just those specific bullet points, and it gives me exactly what I asked for: a little more detail, a little more explanation to kind of walk students through each of these best practices. It's including a resource here. Now, just sort of fair warning, these resources, these links that are provided for ChatGPT don't always take you to exactly where you think they are going to go. Sometimes it might go just to sort of the general landing page of the resource. So you want to make sure you check those very carefully before you include them in your course. But this can be a good start and a good idea of potential resources that you might want to leverage or share. So I've got here essentially what I'm looking for. I'm going to be able to build that content page, build those accordions. Now what I want to do is help create an online discussion board assignment for this module. So again, I'm still working in this particular module. I want to update the discussion that I'm using. What I want to have this discussion do is serve as a formative assessment for student learning about resumes. So as they work through this module, I need a discussion that I can sort of check for understanding for my students to see what they're learning and how they're progressing towards creating a resume. So what do I want it to do? Engage students in critical thinking and reflection and conversation, not just on the resume, but also the importance in searching for the job. So again, I'm being specific. This is my prompt. What do I need? I need detailed instructions and a sample response to students for an initial post that I might share with them, and 5 open-ended questions that I can ask to students to encourage further thinking. So this is a really helpful idea here, I think, for being efficient as an instructor. Use ChatGPT to help you with the responses you're going to share to students. It can take a lot of time to be really engaged in the discussion board, but you can get some really good questions and ideas and sort of response starters yourself there. And this is what I get. I get a nice sort of example of what this might look like. But as I kind of go through this, I see sort of these bullet points and I see just sort of questions. And sometimes this looks to me a little bit more in a discussion like a recipe, and students are going to follow it, and I'm going to get sort of the same thing, which isn't what I'm looking for. I want something that's a little bit better, more authentic, and each student can be a little bit more unique. So what I'm going to ask for is, it's on the right track, but I want a more authentic, informative assessment here. So that's what I asked for, and what I get is exactly that. I get an updated version where now students are going to start to take on the role of creator and reviewer of a resume, and they're going to have a draft of a resume. They're going to review somebody else's. So again, keep working through this. You can ask for things like a rubric as well. There's a lot of information out there and available to students that you can use. And again, I know we're going quick here. I'm going to throw some information in the chat. That's going to be a link to that prompt that I just went through with ChatGPT, so you can kind of review that and take a look at what that looks like. And then also some really good resources here. Sorry, that didn't copyright. I'll get this into the chat in just a second. It's not letting me copy it right now. But these are resources to sort of include and use and leverage as you go forward and as you might want to, learn more about these particular topics and the types of things that you can do within, prompts, how to prompt engineer, how to get ideas for what you can create within generative AI. And any questions there that anybody wants to ask as I work on getting these links together?
It did look like there were 2 questions in the chat, Dan. One of them is, I'm going to go back up here, from Amanda. The question at the end, you said that it's important that we are conversational when interacting with Gen AI and ChatGPT, and you call it the fastest learner in the world. I've always been curious, is it also learning, quote, friendly / conversational communication style, end quote, from our style?
I think that it does. I think that it starts to adjust sort of the responses based on the interactions that it has. It's always sort of updating based on those interactions. So I think it's becoming more conversational with us. And I think sometimes you might even notice it'll take on sort of your personality as you say nice things to it. It'll start saying nice things back to you.
Great. And then one other question from Amanda. They just curious what level of ChatGPT we were looking at in the resume text example.
Yeah, good question. So that is the paid version ChatGPT 4, but it's really not that much difference in terms of output that you're going to get. It's sometimes more up to date in terms of the material that it's sort of scraping from the internet. And it sometimes will have, you can do things like images there, but in terms of creating text and doing the things that we're talking about here, you can certainly do that very efficiently and effectively with the free version.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. I don't see
Yeah.
any other questions. Oh, one other one just popped in. Oh, a couple more.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
do know we have to get things turned around to our next presenter. Dan, I don't know if you want to throw your
Yeah.
email in the chat so we can get our next presenter set up. And maybe you can answer those questions right in the chat as we get things turned around here.
Absolutely. I will do that in the chat, and my email is